Greetings from Sardarabad Memorial, where Armenians in 1918 scored a decisive victory against Turks, thus establishing the first Armenian state. Armenian established the first Armenian state. The protesters from Davuşford, the homeland, and now Sırpazan Baykar had been camping out here since yesterday, and today Bagrat Sırpazan addressed the crowd with a very moving and inspiring speech. PM Pashinyan, on the other hand, was absent. Even though it is customary for Armenian leaders to come to Sardarabad every May 28th to pledge allegiance to the values that our ancestors fought for in Sardarabad. Today we talked to protesters about why they're here, what their expectations from the movement are, and in general, what's next for the movement.
Nare, welcome back from Sardarabad. Tell us about what you witnessed today.
Well, some of the protesters were camping out there and stayed overnight. They moved in their cars, like in a procession of cars yesterday around 6 o'clock from Yerevan. And I only went in the morning, and the atmosphere was very sort of combat ready. Everybody was expecting PM Pashinyan to appear, and there would probably be a clash. There you go. That's the portrait of Armenian, the founder of our First Republic, and it is, of course, for every patriot a very important and moving day, and it was very palpable from the just general moods in the crowds. And yes, but soon enough there were news that Pashinyan is not coming. He has decided to, I think, go to Aparan instead. And Bagrat Sırpazan addressed the crowd with a very inspiring speech, as I said, saying that essentially Armenians and our nation is much greater than any single event that has happened to us, implying the war, and saying that anybody that thinks that we are unable to overcome the challenges that we are now facing doesn't know themselves enough, is either lying or doesn't know the capabilities of the Armenian nation.
And let's rewind a little bit. Last time we spoke was Thursday, but since our last show, there was a major rally on Sunday, and I believe there were some very important announcements made that we should discuss.
Yes, the most important news was that Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan is going to be the candidate for interim PM, who will only essentially rule for 1 year and organize fair elections in 1 year without taking part in them. So this was the major news that the crowd is very excited for. And then, there was a big march to the PM's residency where we asked for a meeting. But of course, PM Pashinyan avoided the meeting, as was expected. Just like in Sardarabad, he tends to be absent, on the run, or just coordinating around this movement, just going when we're not, where we are not going, when we are not going, and arranging accordingly.
If I'm not mistaken, the PM was actually in Lori province, but did not come back that night. He was going there as Armenia had witnessed major flooding, but then he did not return back to the residence when all of the protesters were there. We'll get to the events in Lori, but first let's talk about this phenomenon. Nare, you were present in 2018. You've seen the whole evolution of Pashinyan's political career. Tell me, how did Pashinyan start? Was he always like this, avoiding the crowds, avoiding the people?
No, as you probably know, he was essentially everyone's favorite back in 2018. And this so democratic people's PM, this image of a people's PM was very important to him. He was, biking to work, and essentially he was always, during his career as a opposition, he was always complaining about how Serge Sargsyan, president at the time, was spending so much on his security, was always so official, how he had to stop the traffic. But of course, now he's doing something that no PM or president of Armenia has ever done. The way he is shielded from the Armenian public, from the people, is unprecedented in our history.
And I think we should mention something very significant and disturbing that occurred today at Sardarabad when the Catholicos went to lay flowers with a delegation of clergy. Can you describe what happened?
Well, first of all, it is quite unusual for the Armenian state to have its spiritual leader, the Catholicos, and its secular sort of a worldly leader, the PM, going separately. But this has been the case for quite some time now, that there is this vivid separation, like evident separation. And of course, now with the movement ongoing that enjoys the support of the Holy See of Echmiadzin, this schism has even widened and become bigger. And so even it got to the point where actually there was a row of police stopping the Catholicos from advancing toward the memorial. And this is, I think, a new low point in terms of our values. You know, the importance of Armenian Apostolic Church is ingrained. It's in our constitution. And we have always, you know, even with the children having to learn about the great importance of Armenian Church, especially in Sardarabad, because we know that it was essentially the Catholicos of that time that said that I'm not going to give up. If I am to fall in Echmiadzin, so be it. If the Armenian army, if our people cannot protect me, then this is where I fall. So this was very important, and there was even a separate sort of squad of priests, people that were also in the church, that fought in Sardarabad. So this is also the victory of our church. And now we see that the Catholicos of All Armenians is prevented from even laying flowers at the memorial.
And what were the circumstances? Why was the Catholicos being prevented at that time?
Well, as I said, Pashinyan is trying to work around these movements. For example, this is why he didn't come in the morning, and disseminated information that he was not going to come at all. And then apparently he had plans to go when the Catholicos was going, and so he had to reschedule around it and go a bit later. And then, you know, afterward they had all these flowers and wreaths that were laid there removed, so that Pashinyan could act like he was, I don't know, the first one visiting. And
I saw those images as well. I think that's quite interesting because although, of course, Pashinyan was trying to avoid the crowds of the people, didn't want to come into contact with the Catholicos and had the police run interference, it was still seems that it's important for him, at least perhaps for the outside world, perhaps for the Armenian diaspora, to still project an image that he is able to move freely and have that photo op taken. So I think that's quite interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about who was there today, and we'll cut to some of the interviews you conducted.
Who was visiting, you mean?
Who did you see at Sardarabad? Perhaps we can start and play the interview that you conducted earlier, and then we can talk a little bit about others who were there. Let's go to Hampik.
Well, unfortunately, Armenia is going through a lot of crisis right now. The Armenian people are going through a lot of crisis, and we are here at Sardarabad today, which is one of probably the top 5 historic events in Armenian history. You know, Avarar and Sardarabad and the free liberation of Shushi. You know, that stands out in Armenian history, which is clear-cut examples that when Armenian people are united, when we are armed, we can solve all our problems.
That's quite a striking interview with Hampik, who has always been on the front lines and is now in Armenia struggling again. I couldn't help but notice also in the background, I could see a Yazidi flag, and it seems indeed there's a pretty big presence of Yazidis. Can you tell me, did you meet any of them, and what are their reasons for being there today?
Well, one important reason is that the Yazidi people also share the victory of Sardarabad. We know that the Armenian squads, the Armenian commanders were also joined by Yazidis. So in essence, they have also earned their place, so to speak, in the Armenian state, in the Armenian world, and they're very proud of this achievement. And I got a chance to speak to one of the leaders of their community.
And what did he have to say?
Well, in essence, he mentioned all these victories, and he also talked about how Artsakh was betrayed, and it was a betrayal from the inside, and how it was only temporarily occupied. And he just expressed support for the movement and talked about the role of Yazidis, as I said, in Sardarabad. And in general, it was a very touching interview from our brotherly nation.
Indeed, and Yazidis are, of course, citizens of Armenia and one of the main ethnic minority groups, religious minority groups, and they're also present in the Armenian National Assembly and, of course, don't have a state of their own, so the safety of the Armenian state is something very important for them. Can you tell me what were the highlights from Archbishop Bagrat's speech today at Sardarabad? What was the message he was conveying?
He emphasized the importance of the place where we had gathered, and he said that we're walking over the ground and we don't even know about all the sacrifices, all the martyrs, what it cost for us to preserve the remnants of the Armenian world, because Western Armenia at that point was already lost. And he said that just in 3 years we were able to gather ourselves and decide that we want to live on, that the Armenian world will continue, it will not be destroyed, and that we will be able to do this again if we want to, if we gather our will. And he discussed how we have to always be striving towards like bigger and higher achievements and the noble goals, and how we need to have these big dreams and follow them, and how the current administration is not here because they don't really have anything to do with the values or the meaning of Sardarabad, and perhaps they have realized it. He also mentioned that there will definitely come a time, whereas now he said if they go for show because they're afraid maybe of criticism, there will definitely come a time when these people will not visit Sardarabad because they do this now out of duty. And he said that we, the people, are the same people that show determination not to give up, not to give in. That was demonstrated in those May battles.
Indeed. I think it's significant that, with this recent really extreme flooding that Armenia got in the Lori region of the country specifically, we were reminded of Armenia's history and heritage when we saw that, I believe, perhaps you can tell us how many bridges collapsed, but the one that remained standing was, I believe, the oldest one that goes over the Dibet River. Can you talk to us a little bit about what happened in Lori? What's the situation there? How is the response going?
Well, again, these floods, we haven't seen something like that I think the last time we saw something similar was in the 60s. So, of course, the region was caught unprepared, Lori, and the situation continues to be dire, and apparently, according to the government, there is a great need for volunteers. But legally, before you rely on volunteers, you should actually rely on the police. The police needs to be in emergency situations. They need to be mobilized. So we'll see if this happens. If
I
because
believe we
there's
saw on the day of the flooding, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was Sunday, the day there was a major rally, and you know, it was a bit disheartening because, of course, we saw the internal security forces were basically mostly massed in Republic Square, and it seemed that the rescue efforts on the ground were really lacking. I believe there are at least 4 people who were killed in the flooding, and it seems that, you know, the government's priority was securing Yerevan.
Yes, this was yet another case of these big police concentrations when it comes to political issues. But when the police could be potentially needed, for example, on the borders are left defenseless. There is no mobilization for defense at all, or in such an emergency situation. But this growing number of police, with its growing funding, is increasingly used to secure Pashinyan's seat. For example, here we see that the police are safeguarding his residency, even though the crowd was not even going to attempt anything, because this is just a peaceful and constitutional movement, and we've seen zero indication whatsoever that the protesters are going to try anything violent. And in parallel, they were also securing Bahramian 26, which is where the parliament is. So it's and
the presidency,
we saw the
I
same
believe.
scene in EBRD, yes, and it's just not an optimal use of resources. This budget spent on the police, when Yerevan is one of the safest cities in the world, is not appropriate.
And so the Prime Minister did go. He did manage to get to Sardarabad. He waited until after everyone left. And I noticed on social media some of the kind of government surrogates were criticizing that people were protesting at the same time as there was flooding, kind of implying that, you know, just like, you know, in times we've seen before, that that it should be the people responsible for the duties of the state and volunteering and seeming to try to take people away from the political track. What about the government, and what about, you know, what has their response been for the flooding?
Well, the wife of the prime minister threw a great party, dividing people of the guests of her party into blacks and whites, as is the customary thing to do for this government. Yes, it seems to be that this Marie Antoinette tendency of Anna Hagopian is an ongoing thing. Same in September, when Artsakh was being ethnically cleansed. She was again posting these images of selfies with only the Armenian flag and, you know, smiling. And before that, she was hinting at the Artsakh that was going to be ethnically cleansed by wearing a T-shirt that was saying that refugees bring more than just their belongings to a new country. And then she was just advising Artsaksis that were under the blockade to just grow their own food. And it's just, it's a mockery, essentially, of the people of Armenia. And I don't know how long this can last. The contrast is just striking between what's really going on and what's happening in their private little bougie lives.
Understood. Thank you so much, Nare, for getting that view from the ground today at Sardarabad. We'll, of course, be following this story following Archbishop Bagrat Galstanian's path, now that he's frozen his ecclesiastical role for Tavush and dedicates himself full-time to leading this national salvation movement. And of course, I would like our audience to be aware that we have a forthcoming exclusive interview with Archbishop Galstanian, which was conducted by Nare in Tavush in the very early days of the Tavush for the Homeland movement before they set off on their march to Yerevan. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and anywhere where you get your news, and we will be back with you for more on Thursday. Thank you all.